Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the 10 Golden Rules of Internet Marketing webinar this month. I've been doing the podcast intro, but this month I'm really excited. My friend and client, Steven Goldstein, is here with a live case study. And we're going to talk about how a small law firm absolutely blew up, signed 62 new clients in the first 5 months of the year. Steven, I'm going to introduce you in just 2 minutes. And the biggest things that worked really, really well for Steven, first of all, is he got ranked at the very top of Google with the local service ads. Some people call it Google screened with the check mark. He's also doing really well in the Google Maps. And the phones are absolutely blowing up, and he's had a really, really awesome year. So we're going to talk about the role we played, the amazing role that Steven played in making this happen. So here's the tracking of the clients. We got to 62 clients by the end of June. We turned it down a little bit the last couple months because Steven's dealing with this growth. And we're going to go through the data analysis. We see here that these 62 clients came at a cost of only $657 per client. So we'll go through that in detail and talk about it. Now, if you want to grab a quick screenshot, a quick scan here, I'm going to show this a couple times, so you'll get it in a minute. But we have what we call our secret algorithm for dominating the local service ads. So that's available free at this link, or you can go to 10goldenrules.com/LSA_ebook. LSA like local service ads _ebook. So without further ado, I want to introduce Steven. Welcome to our monthly webinar series.
Thank you, Jay. Happy to be here.
So Steven's background, he went to the University of Albany, New York Law School, and this one's the one with really good stories. You worked at Madison Square Garden in the boxing department. How did that come about?
Before law school, when I was in high school, I actually took a typing class, and those who are over the age of 50 probably remember you didn't learn on an electric typewriter, you learned on a manual typewriter. And at that point, I had also been playing piano since I'm about 8 years old. So I had sort of a natural finger dexterity. And I wound up learning how to type about 90 some odd words a minute without mistakes, which in the 1980s was golden. So I would go to these temporary employment agencies when I was home from college, and they would just drool over me because I was a kid in college who typed 95 words a minute. And I was very highly sought after. Just so you have an idea of how highly paid I was back then, in 1982, 83, when I would work temp jobs, I was making $18 an hour in 1981 or 8, just because I could type. So I got out of college. I was doing some things. I was a big sports fan, grew up in Brooklyn. Obviously, had been to Madison Square Garden a lot of times. I was a boxing fan. And I just sent a blind resume into Madison Square Garden saying, here I am, do you have a job? And literally, they called me in for the interview because I put on my resume that I could type 95 words a minute. Wound up getting a job in the boxing department, which at the time, again, old New Yorkers who may remember, there was the Felt Forum. And once a month, they would put on boxing matches. And I was the assistant to the matchmaker. And I got to run around in the boxing world for a few years, which was extremely interesting. And it's funny, I actually have a client today who was a trainer back in the 80s and remembered me and looked me up.
Awesome.
He had heard I was a lawyer, and I'm representing him, and I'm actually representing his fighter, for the contracts and stuff. Yeah. The one cool thing, and then I'll get off it, is I got to play basketball in the arena. I got to see any concert I wanted to for nothing. And it was a dream come true. It was a great job for a kid into sports in his 20s, but that is how I wound up there.
So I didn't realize I didn't share a screen. So the slides, there's our graphics. And here's the Google local service ads, the Google Maps, and Steven's client growth, and the data we're going to get into in a minute. And this is the scanner if you want to scan later on. So then 27 years ago, you founded Goldstein and Handworker. And you're a personal injury and criminal law firm, and that those are your specialties. But talk about the history of the firm.
So, again, I went to law school a little later. I think I graduated when I was 27 or 28. Um, my grandfather owned a factory in Brooklyn, and he was an entrepreneur to the bone. And he had always told me the job is not secure. Whatever you do, go out and work for yourself. So when I went to law school, my thought was, I'm doing this so I could eventually open up my own firm, which I did after I was out of law school for about 2 years. Um, Built up the practice. It was in Manhattan, in Midtown Manhattan. I then moved to New Jersey, so I figured I would open up in New Jersey, and I would literally go out and hustle and pound the pavement. I would go to client doctor appointments to meet doctors. I would just go out and network, and obviously this was way before digital marketing or anything like that. And built a firm where I've probably represented thousands of people. I started my original firm in 1993. This I'm sorry, 94. This Goldstein and Handwork we started in 2007. So I've kind of been on my own since 1994. Well, 30
Great.
years.
All right. And next up is this guy, Jay Berkowitz. I'm your host. Steven was going to introduce me a little bit.
Yeah. So, how do I introduce Jay? I met Jay at one of the legal marketing shows. I was drawn to him because he seemed very genuine. And those of you
Thank you.
lawyers who, like me, who have no idea of what goes on in the digital marketing world, we are at the mercy of companies like Jay. But I met him, I talked to him. There was just something about him that I trusted, and we hit it off on a personal level. And I have to say, him and his people have been fantastic. And honestly, when I went to him, I was not looking for these kinds of results. I was really looking to, I would be happy if I was getting 2 or 3 cases a month. And he basically laid out the map for me, simple stuff. I actually did what he told me, and it just took off. And Jay and his team at 10 Golden Rules, I actually talk him up. I joke for Jay that when I'm done as a lawyer, I want to be a sales rep for his company, because I truly believe in what they do and how they treat people like me who really don't know much about this sort of thing, but are looking for results.
That's awesome. And couple things about your story that, I'm probably made a mistake. My mom told me like I should take typing. And I said, Mom, I'm going to have a secretary. I'm not going to have to learn how to type. And so I see that typing worked really well for you.
I
And I've struggled, I've actually written 4 books and I can barely, I can type pretty good now like this.
I pride
And my
myself
dad
on
said,
that. Yeah.
my dad said I should go to law school. I probably should have listened to him too, because now I work with so many lawyers who do so well. But
I'll tell
I
you, I
did
pride
have,
myself on the fact that I never had a secretary or paralegal who ever typed faster than me.
you must be lightning fast. But I had a marketing career working with McDonald's and Coca-Cola and Sprint, and jumped in to technology early on. So that's how I kind of got ahead of the curve. Wrote the 10 Golden Rules of Online Marketing in 2003. And the name of the company became 10 Golden Rules because I wrote this book and had this presentation. I was speaking at all the conferences about internet marketing in 2003. Google was still in beta and Mark Zuckerberg was still in high school. So that's my story.
And I've obviously read the book over and over.
Thank you so much. So, we'll get into the case study, but you told me earlier, as a matter of fact, we shot some other video, and you were telling the story about, you'd had previous digital marketing firms, and you met us and you held off and you hesitated. Talk to me about previous relationships and what came about and why you decided to hire us.
My story is probably the equivalent of almost any law firm owner with my knowledge of digital marketing. Um, you get promised this, promised that. Very hard to reach people. What I love about you guys is we do monthly meetings and we go over everything. And if I want to tweak, it gets tweaked. If I want to slow down a little bit, it gets slowed down. If I want to step it up, it gets stepped up. Um, there was really no follow through. There was no accountability. And it seemed like every one of these firms, they seem to just be chasing the next client. And that once they got you, you kind of would fade into the background. Now, thankfully for me, digital marketing was really only a small part of the way I was acquiring cases. So I kind of put up with it for a while. Um, but then, I realized that, wait a minute, I'm still getting cases the old fashioned way, but digital marketing could be another great sort of complement. It was never meant to be my be all end all. And in fact, there's a lot of digital marketing that I don't do that you guys recommend. And that's because, I think every law firm owner has their own sort of goals, is what they're trying to do. I've been practicing for 33 years. I'm not looking to build the empire right now. I'm looking to maintain a lifestyle, maintain a case flow, but not, I want to stop and smell the roses a little bit. And so I don't do everything, but what I did do worked phenomenal.
What was an average month before? How many cases were you signing, and where did those cases come from?
I've always had a pretty steady flow of case intakes. So I practiced in New York and New Jersey, and early in my career, I really leveraged that. So I would have lawyers from New York refer their New Jersey cases, lawyers from New Jersey refer their New York cases. And again, early in my career, thankfully, I realized I was a salesman first and then a lawyer, because the greatest lawyer in the world with no cases is just a great lawyer with no cases. So I was out there hustling. I would go to networking events. I would talk to other lawyers. Um, Other plaintiffs' lawyers are a great source of business because, they may have a passenger and a driver, or they may have a case that they just want to slough off. Um, and then over the years, obviously, I've represented thousands and thousands of people. And I do a lot of the old school marketing, which is not digital. I send a newsletter to people every month in print. My mailing list is about 4,800 people, and that would generate about 5 or 6 cases a month. And the beauty of that is people don't throw out newsletters as much as you think they do. They kind of stick around. I have some good stories about how I got cases through the newsletter to people I didn't even send them to, but in Manhattan, sometimes,
Pass alongs and referrals and
yeah,
what.
well, the postman gets lazy and just throws it on the floor and somebody else picks it up. But I realized that the future was digital. I was doing okay that way. And that's when I came into that world. And then when I met you, um, and now I've kind of become the person who gets the cases and now maybe sometimes farms them out to other people.
So a typical month was like 5 or 10 cases,
Yeah,
five criminal, 5 PI, five
something like
lawyer
that.
referrals, and 5 past client referrals, something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, great. So first, I want to jump into we'll talk about these local service ads. And the biggest change is that there used to be 2 on the mobile and 3 at the top of a like a desktop screen, and now Google's flip-flopped it for whatever reason. So when you're coming up at the top of these mobile results, these are great because people can just click to call you. And then obviously on the page they can message you or call you. But talk to us a little bit about taking those calls and the difference of getting calls versus getting people to your website.
So my website presence is, I don't do any SEO. And if I get a case off of my website, that's a very rare occurrence. But when COVID hit, uh, like everybody else, I had to shut down my office in Manhattan. And I went to a remote answering service, which I still use to today. And that's who picks up my calls. So I was able to route the calls, the LSA calls would go to my answering service. They would screen them. If it was worthwhile, it would then get forwarded to me or a member of my team. It's super duper important that those calls get picked up. Not even that there's a message taken. My closing rate, 99% of if there is a legitimate case from those calls, it's probably over 90%. The only time I wouldn't close a case if it's a legitimate case is people are afraid to use their insurance to pay for medical bills. Um, but what you find is these people are usually not shoppers. They will take most likely the first law firm that they call if you sound friendly, competent, listen to what their problem is, and take immediate action to sign them up. I do not wait. If it's a case, I have an in-house investigator who will get to them within an hour. If it's a legitimate case, he will then follow up. He will call them, follow up with them, and they will be signed within definitely within 2 hours of the first phone call through the LSA.
And I think that's part of the secret of success with this program is you've got to treat these leads as gold. You've got to answer the phone. We'll talk about this a little bit more, and you've got to jump on them right away. I mean, you're obviously in if not the most competitive market for this business in the world, top three for sure. And if you don't jump on it, like you said, get your investigator out to see them, get the case signed, or docu sign them. Good luck, right? So there's going to be, it's like a bloody red ocean, right? Like 8 other guys will be on, if they call up someone else, they'll get out to see them, right?
Yeah, I mean, the key is you must give them a reason not to call anyone else. And the best reason is you sound like somebody I could help. Somebody will be seeing you within an hour or two. And you've now taken all the stress off of them. Because remember, in personal injury, we're not, they're not shopping price. Um, most people are shopping, am I connecting with the person on the other end of the line? Is this a person or a firm that I want to work with? And I try and really jump on that very early on, especially if I'm taking the call.
One of the valuable things about this program, I talk a lot about the local service ads. It gives the small guy a chance to compete, because in a lot of markets, our clients will be literally 1-2 with Morgan and Morgan, the biggest personal injury firm in the country. And so it gave you, as a smaller firm, solo lawyer, you answer the phone, you help people out, you send your investigator out to see them right away. They don't differentiate between you and the firm with 200 lawyers. So this is great. The reason we're doing this webinar with you
I
is
don't believe I compete with Morgan and Morgan. It's like saying, the Yankees are competing with a single A baseball team or something. It's not that I'm a single A level lawyer, but when you flip it, Morgan and Morgan can't compete with me. And on what level can't they compete with me? They're not local. They don't have a past relationship with 5,000 people who've been happy. And, they can't compete with the fact that you're talking to the firm owner, most likely on your first call. So, you talk to a lot of lawyers and, they get afraid of these big behemoth Morgan and Morgans and the other firms. I really believe that they cannot compete with the small law firm, with the boutique, with the really personal service.
yeah.
And the LSAs to me are money very, very well spent for the reasons, you've said.
And thank you again for doing this, because I often get the question from the startup, from the small firm, like, how do we go about this? How do we compete with the big guys? So the second thing that you did really well, and our team coached you on, is you've got to get into the back end, and you've got to disposition those leads. This is this is, I think, our biggest client. That they'll get like up to 200 leads a month. They're in a smaller, a less competitive niche than personal injury. But talk about the back end of the system and the feedback you give to Google.
So it is important for my own internal bookkeeping as well as Google. Google wants to see that not only have you answered the call, but that you've noted it, interacted, and I have no idea if it helps their algorithm or not, but when I was doing this consistently and I was getting cases I wanted, I was getting those types of calls more and more. So once I finish up the call, because I'm taking notes on the call anyway, I'll just immediately go into the back end, type in the name of the person, their phone number, what kind of case it was, and if it's a case I'm interested in. And I have no idea how the Google algorithm works. That's what you do, but apparently the more you do that, the happier Google is, and the happier the local service ad gods are, and they give you more leads. I mean, it's kind of as simple as that. I know nothing about digital advertising or the technology. I just know Jay tells me to do it, or his team tells me to do it, and I do it.
Yeah, so I haven't seen the statistics, but if you think of it, like, this is right at the top of Google. You've got the check mark. You got, Google is approving you in some way, shape, or form. I mean, we went through a vetting process to get you screened, and it's not as complex as it was in the early days. And then, you know, basically, the consumer comes here, and they might have heard about this program because it's also been available, what are called local service ads for plumbers, air conditioners, and there's a check mark in that program. They call it Google Verified. But the consumer has maybe some history or some knowledge that there's a program where Google vets people, and so that you're right at the top of Google. You got this check mark, and your phone, you click to calls right there, and that's the beauty of this program. So I think 30 to 40% of the clicks are coming from this program. Number of our clients are having a similar success, coming up right at the top of search. And then the next question we get asked all the time is like, does it really work? Like, we were getting some of those leads for a while, and then they faded off. This is a client of ours with 7 locations in a state. They're pretty dominant. They're pretty consistently spending around $30,000 in this program and signing 25 or 30 cases every month, around $1,300 a case. And then Steven's numbers we showed briefly earlier. So we were spending $5,000 or $10,000 a month, getting 20, 30, 40 leads a month, and then signing the clients. I guess we peaked in February, March, and April, and then we slowed things down a little bit to let you catch up. But there's the 62 cases, average $657 a case. Talk a little bit about what that cost per case means, and the stream of the cases.
So I am a small firm. I don't have, hundreds of thousands of dollars to spend. And it was really important to me to try and keep that number at a manageable level, which to me was about $700 or less. Um, Now, I think those also include criminal cases, which I think when we were talking, which is crazy, those turned out to be more expensive than the personal injury, which again, I don't understand how, what, or why, but
A
that's
little
that
atypical, right? Yeah.
yeah, that is how it turned out, because obviously the criminal cases, a good criminal case is still, I guess, dollar wise, is going to be minuscule compared to even a very average personal injury case. But I was very cognizant of my budget, which is why when I saw this started working, I really was taking seriously doing the things that I needed to do to maximize um, the leads I was getting. One of the things that I did is I told Jay I really wanted to be uber local, as opposed to going 30, 40 miles away from where I was. I was more trying to be the big fish in the little pond as opposed to just being in the pond. And it worked, because especially in my New Jersey office, I would get calls from now people 20, 30 miles away, and they would keep saying, I made a search, you showed up number one on Google. You're all over Google. And I would just I'd call Jay. I'm like, we're not like doing SEO or anything. How in the world am I showing up number one on Google? I mean, I am the poster child for the way not to run your website as far as maximizing it. And it was through the local service ads, was causing me to show up number one on organic Google searches, which again, I have no idea how that happened, but that's what was happening. And that's why this LSA program is something that I tell people about. Again, I'm a believer in abundance, so I'm not afraid of competition. There's enough cases for everybody. There's probably more than enough cases for everybody. Um, and when you work with good people, you want to let people know about it.
So I teased earlier that we would share our secret algorithm for how, what the part we played, and frankly, Steven played an equally important part. So that's our what we call our secret algorithm, or the secrets behind dominating the local service ad. Again, you can scan it and get a copy of the document. But the first thing I always talk about when I talk about this topic is there was an urban myth, or maybe it was reality, that there was a red phone in the White House back in the Reagan White House in the days of the Cold War. And when that red phone rang, it only had one extension at the other end. It was the Kremlin. It was Russia in the middle of the Cold War. And so when the red phone rang, you had to urgently pick it up. You know, we were on the verge of World War, and you had to pick up that phone. And so I say that, you know, when you're running this program, this local service ads program, it's similar to the red phone. You got to pick up your phone, and you've got to answer all calls within 15 seconds. And Google's even measuring how many times you miss a phone call. So it's mission critical now that you answer the phone. Now, that's on the local service ad program, but all through the years with Google, whenever they've introduced a new product, when they introduced YouTube, it became very beneficial to put videos on your website and to do YouTube videos. When they introduced Google Maps, and it became, you know, very popular, the better you do in Google Maps, the better you do in SEO. So nobody's officially stated this from Google, as far as I know, but they're measuring how quickly you answer the phone now, and it's part of the Google algorithm. That they've told us is the case, but they haven't told us that it's connected to your regular SEO. But I believe that when Google tracks something, they put it in the algorithm. So answering the phone is not only important for the local service ad program, but even if you're not running this program, you've got to answer the phone quickly and no missed calls. Steven, you want to talk about how important that's been to you?
Again, so I have an answering service. So these calls are routed directly to them. So they pick up the call within 1 or 2 rings, because they pick up all my calls within 1 or 2 rings. They are instructed, in order to reach me, there's only a handful of calls that they're supposed to send to me: new case, or an adjuster calling to settle a case. Those are the number 1 and 2 things. Even like judges take you know, are not as high on the list as those 2 things. So when I see my answering service calling me, it is like the red phone. I pick that call up if I can. Listen, obviously, if I'm in court or in the middle of something, I don't. And then they are instructed to take a message, and then I get a text. And if I can't return the call immediately, my investigator will.
But but in terms of
and
the algorithm that Google's measuring, and they're measuring a bunch of factors: reviews, proximity, how quickly you answer the phone, how you deal with your clients, you know, the star rating on your reviews. But if your answering service is answering immediately, you've got the checks, both checks from Google. They're answering the phone and they're not missing any calls.
that is what happens.
And one of the other things we've learned, the answering machines, or the phone trees, like press 1 if you're a new client, press 2 if you're an existing client. Those things are hurting this program. So you want to get rid of the answering machines, the recorded messages, after hours. You definitely want to go to an after hours phone service. Next thing in our secret algorithm, we want to set bidding to maximize leads. And Google goes back and forth on this a little bit, but that seems to be the best way to go right now. And then designate all calls immediately in the back end of the system. So when you log in, like if we clicked on one of these, this is just a picture. It's not an actual. It's not. We're not live on Google, obviously. But if Steven gets this, he clicks on it. He goes in there and he says, "This was a good lead, booked." You know, it's like Google's terminology from the days of the air conditioning guys and the plumbers. They booked a meeting. They're going to go out and give the consumer a quote. Or archiving meaning this wasn't a good lead. This guy's looking for a divorce attorney, and we do personal injury. So Steven hops in right away and does those. And then, you know, the phenomenal role he's played in this program is getting 1 to 2 new reviews per week. So I'll let him talk about how he got the reviews. But if you saw in the data, in this year, in this calendar year, he's gone from 50 reviews to 103 reviews. So here's the total reviews. You hear they're all five star. So he's asking folks who love him. But Stephen, and the other thing is very important is you want to get 1 to 2 new reviews per week. So a lot of people will, oh, I need reviews. They'll give an incentive to their paralegals. They'll get 30 reviews within 2 weeks and then nothing for weeks or months. So it's very, very important that you do it on a regular cadence and you get 1 to 2 new reviews per week. Again, the Google reps have told us that that really boosts the algorithm. So Stephen, how did you do so great with 50 new reviews this year?
So it became the most important part of my marketing strategy, especially once we started working together. And for every personal injury lawyer, there is one point in the case and the relationship with your client when they are the most happy. And that's when you're handing them a check. I make every client come to see me to get their check, and we will then talk about how the case went. And some clients, I will jokingly say, you know, part of the retainer says you can't get your check unless you write a Google review. And then they laugh. But the real key is you want to ask for these things. I find you must do it in person. I'm not set up, where they're like, if they leave my office without leaving a review and they say, oh, I'll do it when I get home, 99% of the time it's not happening. Yeah, I think it's really important to ask them while you're sitting there and they're at their happiest. Um, I mean, I've gotten Google reviews on my criminal cases literally right after the disposition of the case. I mean, there's no criminal defendant who's happier with their lawyer than when they walk out of court and the case has just been dismissed.
And they get their phone back. And then
Right.
you
And they
keep up
get their
to
phone
date.
back, right? Um, and nobody's ever turned me down.
Yeah.
It's a little harder to get the criminal reviews, quite frankly, because nobody wants to be Googled themselves and then they see that they've given a review about their criminal case. But, there's ways to get around that. The other secret that I had is we all get a lot of calls from people that we can't help, but we're nice to them and we give them a little advice, or we'll say, you need this kind of help, or you don't even need a lawyer. I've gotten a handful of reviews. I would then say to these people, listen, I don't want anything for my time, but can you just do me a favor and just write a review that you called me, I couldn't help you, but I was really nice to you on the phone. And again, not being a tech savvy person, and I do not review things when I buy them. I don't go onto Google and look for reviews. I just don't. Maybe it's, for whatever reason. But I will tell you, probably 85 to 90% of these cases I signed through my LSAs, the first thing people will say is, I saw your Google reviews, so I called you. And again, for someone like me who was not tech savvy, I was not in this digital world, I was almost non-believing. I was like, I would almost say to these people, seriously? Like, that's the reason you called? And a lot more people than I ever realized that is what they do. And I've made Google reviews the number one marketing thing that I do because I could do it. It's easy. And I'm asking for it when people are at their most, where they'll do it because they feel some reciprocity to you, especially if you did a good job.
Yeah.
Sometimes even if it's not a big settlement, if they think you treated them well, if your office treated them well, it's not only about the money when you get these reviews. A lot of people, what I found, they're more interested in the whole process, how they're treated, if they have a connection with the lawyer. It's nice to get somebody $1 million, but the majority of the cases for someone like me are not, high six-figure cases, but I could do very well, 50, 60, $70,000 cases. I could make a nice living.
One simple thing and one sophisticated thing so the simple thing is this is a picture of your Google Maps, or what Google calls Google Business Profile. The consumer, we would just call it the maps. And if you click on your maps, your listing that came up in the maps, this is what you see. So these reviews from Google Maps are the ones that we see in the local service ads. So that's a simple thing, but just so everybody knows, you ask people to review you in your maps or your Google Business Profile, and that is the exact, it's linked to the local service ads, and that's what people see in the local service ads. The other thing that you've done really, really well, and I know our team gave you this tip, is you see here, this firm was great at getting my car accident case settled. They really know what they're doing. I highly recommend Steven's staff for anyone injured in a car accident. And getting keywords in those reviews is super valuable as well. So is that something you give them a little tip when you ask for the review?
What I usually do is I ask them in the review is if they could tell a little story, uh, as opposed to just saying this firm was great. I think what I found is people, when they read these reviews, they seem they're more believable if there's a little bit of a story behind them, as opposed to just these people were great, they got me a lot of money. And I will tell them, I would ask them, in your review, can you just at least describe what kind of a case it was and what you were happy about? And I don't try and feed them the exact words because I want it to sound natural. Um, but I do ask them, in the review, if they could just put in what kind of a case it was, and they do.
One of the other programs that we're running with some of our clients is for bigger firms. Like Steven obviously has the opportunity. He deals with almost every client directly, and he can ask them when they come into the office. With some firms where, like Stewart and Stewart, we did a case study with these folks, and they're signing about 60 cases a month. So the paralegals are incentivized with a gift certificate program to get the 5-star reviews. Every month there's 10, 15, 20 cases that they didn't get a review done. And we send them these gift packs on behalf of the attorneys and call the folks up and make sure they open it up. There's a gift certificate in there. There's some VIP cards they can give to friends or family if they're injured. There's some merchandise, and we either say that, thank you for being a part of our family, or we call it the VIP program or the inner circle program. And then we asked the people on the phone, hey, if I texted you a link, could you do us a favor and do a 5-star Google review? So that's another program you can do if you're a little bigger in size. The next part of the secret algorithm is what we call the multi-location strategy. And if you look at Morgan & Morgan, they actually have 6 locations in Orlando. Now, Morgan has a big office and a big building. I'm sure they own right in Orlando, but they have 6 locations. So Steven's been marketing to 2 locations, one in New Jersey and one right in Manhattan. And the one thing I always say to people is, like, it's great if you want to do the strategy. The first thing is you need a real location. You cannot have like a post office box or a virtual office like a Regis or a WeWork space. You need a real office, and then you also need to be able to get enough Google reviews to make that location stand on its own. So, if you're really just starting out and you've only got 10 or 15 Google reviews, I wouldn't recommend the strategy. But if you're a bigger firm, in particular, if you can maybe staff a second location, if you're some of your attorneys or workers commute in, maybe a couple times a week, they could go to that virtual location. You could take meetings there, that real location, and you got to be able to put a sign on the door. So, Steven, talk about the 2 locations.
So I started my practice in Manhattan. I moved out to New Jersey. I opened an office here probably about 8 to 10 years ago when I realized I was growing my practice in Jersey, and it made no sense to do a court appearance in New Jersey and then travel 2 hours into Manhattan and waste all that time. I made a conscious decision to really focus more on my marketing in my New Jersey office for the reasons of my New York office is located in Midtown Manhattan. And I was getting a decent amount of cases from having been there for 25 years and through my networking and referrals. New Jersey, I didn't really have that sort of setup. And my mindset was, in Manhattan, I'm really now I'm competing with the giants. Forget about Morgan and Morgan. There's probably 20 firms just within 5 blocks of my office in Manhattan that are probably spending $100,000 a month on SEO and $100,000 a month on, Google ads or whatever. And I said, I think every dollar I spend there is kind of like I'm throwing away. So I really focused on my New Jersey location, but I also have the same strategy for Google reviews for my New York office as I do in my New Jersey office. And I would, ask people if it was a New York case, I would ask them to review the New York office. And you have to be kind of specific about that because when if somebody Googles me to write a review, I think depending on where they are, either my New York office or my New Jersey office will show up. So, they could live in New Jersey. If it was a New York case, I have to tell them, when you do it, please make sure you're reviewing the New York office as opposed to the New Jersey office.
And one thing I was going to ask you at the start, you got some really big cases, right? Like these are not just
Yeah.
small
Oh,
soft tissue cases.
I remember one of the first calls I got off this program. It was a woman, and she said, my husband got hit by a tractor trailer about 8 months ago and he had surgery. Is that something you'd be interested in? And the first question I asked was, am I really the first lawyer you're calling? And she said yes. Um, so what was also interesting, I called Jay, is that, this really took off for me at the beginning of the year, and I'm starting to settle those cases now. And it's really interesting because, again, I was driven mostly by referrals and very, old school type marketing. But I have gotten good cases. And I don't even know why this is, but it almost seems like the quality of the cases I'm getting are better than I was getting through other means. Now, to me, it may just be that these people are more motivated because they're actually searching and then picking up the phone, they're putting in effort. But I found that the quality of the cases I'm getting through the local service is probably better. There's better insurance coverage. The people have better coverage themselves than I've been getting, than I would get in other ways. And so it was actually really interesting.
You're also, thank you. You're also taking the message leads. So this is
Yes.
relatively new in the program.
And I'm responding to them.
Yeah, and you respond immediately, right? Super
Yes.
important.
Those go straight to my cell phone, um, where they will specifically say, do not call. I will text them. And I have my own template to get them interested in calling me. My rate of people calling me after the first message of them saying, please don't call me, is about 90% based on the message I send back to them.
So you send them a text and say you're going
I
to be
send them a text, but it's kind of worded in a way that, listen, I'm not threatening. I'm not looking to, because a lot of these people, I think they're afraid that they're going to be sold hard. Um, and, I just say, look, based on what you texted me, I think I could help you, but I really need to talk to you. If you're uninterested in talking to me, that's not how I operate. And you might be better off going somewhere else. And like any human nature is, as soon as somebody says, I may not be interested in you, that drives up their interest in me. I mean, that's just basic human psychology. So I
love it.
kind of let them know that I'm happy to talk to you, but in a nice way, I really don't need your case. And, you know, I don't work that way. So if that's the way you need to work, somebody else is probably better for you. And it works that way too with my criminal cases, especially in the criminal, which is different than the PI. You do get a lot of price shoppers. And as soon as I get a price shopper on the phone, the first thing I say is, listen, you're charged with a crime. If price is your criteria, I am not your person. You have my number, but you're probably better off than calling somebody else. 75% of the time when I do that, they invariably call me back, um, and they'll retain me at a higher price. Um, because again, at this stage of my career, and I think it makes you less needy and less desperate. You've got to stick to your guns. If you're worth X amount, I believe you can't really. Then you're racing to the bottom, which is not good for you financially or for your own self-esteem. And again, human nature. I don't do free consultations on criminal cases because in my mind, if somebody calls me and I say it's $500 to sit with me, and they call the next guy and he says, no, you can come in, I'll talk to you for free. As much as it makes no sense, they're going to believe I'm a better lawyer for no other reason except that you need money to see me. Now, the other lawyer could be 10 times better than me, but that's just how human nature will work.
A couple other new things going on in the program. You can add multiple photos now. So we're adding multiple images. And Google's announced that they're not going to accept disputes anymore. that the artificial intelligence that listens to the calls is going to do all the disputes. Have you seen it that way in your setup, Stephen?
I don't think they're doing too good of a job because they made me pay for a divorce call, but I guess they're working on the kinks. But I
And
will say I was not a big disputer anyway because I kind of wanted to be the guy who didn't give Google a hard time. And I don't know if that,
yeah,
you
that
know,
that was definitely a positive factor early on. You can select service areas. So we've been switching around some service areas for Stephen. And then the last thing is we have a program, and I did a whole webinar on this. You can find it on the 10 Golden Rules YouTube channel called Help I've Fallen and I Can't Get Back Up. Because many people tell us we were in the top three. We were always coming up in the top three, and then we fell out of the top three. And so the heart of that program is you're going to completely reset your local service ads. You're going to change your bidding strategy, change your geography. You're going to open up a bunch of categories, maybe even take general leads. And so there's a whole webinar on that, or we're happy to consult with you. If you used to show up here in the top three or top two, now in the screenshot, and your leads have gone down to a trickle, we can help you get back in the top three. So once again, here's that link if you want to get a copy of the secret algorithm, learn a little bit more about these strategies. So, the great news for Stephen is he got assigned 62 cases this year. It has been an influx, right? Like you've really been pressed personally. I know we had a call with your investigator, and he was like, "Can you please turn it off?" And he said it in much more colorful words. But
yep.
talk about managing the influx of the cases, and how you've adapted the firm and how you're dealing with that.
So quite honestly, I had to reach out to another law firm to help me. Um, and what I did is I asked them to help me with cases that I had already had in litigation, and they're helping me with over 150 of those cases. Um, and I sort of constituted my staff to deal with uh, these new cases. I mean, with the new cases, once you get them set up, once the people are going to the doctor, it's kind of there's not really a lot of heavy lifting until you have to put the case in suit. So I have a virtual paralegal, um, and I myself I use a lot of freelance paralegals and help when I have this on project basis. But I have my virtual paralegal is really only does he inputs the cases, helps me get the client set up to the doctor, sends in all the forms you need if it's an auto case, and then my investigator has 1 or 2 days a week. He specifically just calls people, new cases, and says, "How are you doing? Are you going to the doctor? Any problems we could help you with?" And that has helped me tremendously. And like I think I said before, I am not looking to grow to 10 lawyers in 20 states at this stage in my career. I've been at it 35 years. I make a good living. Um, I am not looking for one of these people to grow, but obviously I'll take the cases. And what I'm doing now is I'm developing relationships with other firms. And if the caseload gets too big for me, they're more than happy to help me um, with the cases that I'm getting through, the LSA or other means.
So you've got another firm helping with some of the hard heavy lifting, and you virtualized some of the things. One thing you said in there that's not subtle, because I hear this over and over again. The number one complaint about personal injury cases is my lawyer doesn't get back to me, doesn't tell me what's happening with my case. And so you've got your investigator calling every couple days. How do you manage that? Like, do you have a schedule? Do you have a list?
We have a software that we use for case management, and literally he goes from, I'll give him, okay, need you to call these 20, newest to oldest, and he literally just goes down the list. And just, understand they don't necessarily need to hear from me. They just need to hear from somebody. Um, and they're instructed in the beginning of the case that, look, I'm going to be really hard to get a hold of because I'm working on cases. However, all it takes is a minute. It's just a quick phone call. How you doing? Oh, good. You're going to your doctor? Great. You need anything? We're here. And hang up the phone. He probably blows through anywhere from 25 to 35 calls a day just on clients. And then what happens is they develop relationships with your paralegals or your investigator. And I've had now where when they want to refer a new case, they don't call me, they call my investigator, they call my paralegal. Um,
That's great.
and but again, I'm small, I'm not, and I don't have turnover. So the people that have been with me have been with me. I have one paralegal been with me for almost 28 years, another one 23, another one 16. So they know us. They know us, especially from, when we had their case.
But this is not subtle, by the way. Steven has 103 5-star reviews. And I think a big part of that, I mean, obviously you have a personal relationship, you do a great job for these folks, but unquestionably, you reach out to them proactively and they know what's happening with their case. They know who to reach and
We,
they're not frustrated. Like I unfortunately
again,
had a case, I got rear-ended and I kept calling, my attorney, like, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Unfortunately, I didn't use one of my clients. I used a guy from my networking group, and I wouldn't make that mistake again.
yeah, I mean, it's also what I find is, again, I'm a little more old school. I believe you pick up the phone as opposed to an email. And I tell the people that work for me, and and I'm a believer, if it's important enough, it's not a text, it's not an email, it's a phone call. And a simple 2-minute call to say, how are you doing, is just does wonders for the relationship. And again, at the end of the day, I've been at this a long time. Everybody wants to get as much money as possible, but if the clients feel that they've got a relationship with the firm where when they pick up the phone, the lawyer's office actually knows about their case, it's amazing what it does for the relationship. Money almost becomes secondary. Um, and with the people that I have the relationships with, it's very rare. It also leads to a lot of trust. So when I recommend and say, look, this is probably a good thing for you to do as far as taking a settlement, obviously I have to really believe it, but I find I don't get as much pushback. Where you'll get, oh, I know this person, they had a case, they got $1 million, you're telling me to take whatever it is. And again, to me, I think that's the number one driver of my repeat business, is not the results, it's more of the relationship.
So we've started doing a couple other projects, and Stephen mentioned he's not doing everything with us, but we started doing a little bit of work on the Google Maps. Um, this is a tool that shows us where you're coming up on the Google Maps. So we want to see as much green, which is in the 1, 2, and 3. If we go back here, this was position 1, 2, 3. If we click more businesses, they're going to probably show 30 or 40 different listings. And so you do really well all throughout this area. Here, these are different search terms. Doing pretty well around your location and a little bit to that northwest. So some of the things we do is, update the Google Maps, putting updates in there, getting the whole thing set up correctly is very, very important. And adding the updates are very valuable. The other things we do is we get links, local area links, or what we call citations to the map location. That helps. And then we do a thing called NAP, name, address, and phone. You've got to be really precise that if your name is in Google, in the Google Maps listing, is Goldstein and Handworker LLP, you've got to be super consistent with your address, your name, your address, and your phone number everywhere you're listed throughout the area. And then, frankly, Steven's done the biggest job with this, which is getting those Google reviews on a consistent cadence. Steven, anything else about the maps from your side?
Well, just although it looks like a lot of red, the areas of green are where I basically told you guys to focus. As I said, I'm not looking to expand so far from where my office is. And so there's a lot of, I guess, orange and red. Obviously, we always want to get better, but there's more than enough green there to make me happy.
Actually, those are very good results for a competitive market. Like if we're in like a super small town, like not New Jersey, New York. Um,
Yeah.
and then the other thing we're doing is some video. And I teed one up here. So hopefully this will play okay.
I like how he said my spouse, not me. Thank you.
Here's a situation I've had. Client gives me a call, says, I don't know what to do. I just got a call from the police. My spouse has been arrested for a DWI. What do I do? In New Jersey, thankfully, a DWI is not a crime. So unless somebody has committed some other crime, the person will be let go from the DWI for a future court appearance. So this video may be more of social science advice than it would be for a legal advice. But
So I think you can go to Steven's YouTube channel and see more of that. But the reason why we do these videos and the reason why it starts with a question is that when we do Google searches these days, we're asking questions, something we don't know the answer to. So what do I need an attorney if the insurance company won't pay for my car accident repairs? What do I do if my spouse gets a DWI? So Steven's answering these questions. We've done our first series of videos, and those will go on YouTube. Google owns YouTube, so it's part of the algorithm. And then we'll put the videos on blogs on his website and use them throughout his social media. So we shot those. You were actually down in Florida here with our local videographer.
Yes.
But we shoot all across the country. What was the experience like for you, and what did you learn?
I would like to say that you guys flew me down and put me up in the hotel, but I had my wife and I rented an apartment for a month down where Jay was, and it was great. I think videos, that was really the first thing I'd been doing videos for a while, but I was doing them very simple. My paralegal's son was in videographer school, and I would throw videos up in pretty much the similar manner. I would ask questions. These obviously are a lot more professional looking that Jay is doing, but part of my marketing strategy is, so I've done videos of how to prepare for a deposition. And when my clients are told they have a deposition, I will direct them to go watch the video first. Um, but there's a lot of questions that we get on a daily basis that it's easy to tell the clients, watch the video and then we'll talk. And I have had clients in the past say, I called you because I watched the video. Again, I was in utter disbelief, but people do it. And just because it's not the way I would retain somebody or hire a company doesn't mean that other people don't do it. And that's the hardest lesson I learned. I learned it thankfully a while ago, that not everybody purchases using the same criteria I do.
So next up, we've done a couple of these case study webinars, as I mentioned, and I call this the how to be a great client and how to be a great agency section. So I'll go first. And success with a digital marketing agency, the agency's got to be good, but frankly, the client's got to be good. We've worked with over 100 law firms now, and no matter what, like if we do everything right, we still don't get the results if the client doesn't play their part. So the first thing is you've got to be responsive. So like if you're frustrated with your agency, we need you to approve things. We need you to show up for meetings and go through the programs we're recommending, and take our advice. Like a lot of times, we recommend to clients to add chat to their website, the little chat bot that pops up on the website. And we've seen over and over and over that it increases leads about 20%. So, I have pretty darn good proof now. About 80 of 81 cases, it's worked well. So, and I have it on my own site. So that's an example of, I've got proof that these things are working well. The local service ad, some people still don't want to do them. The next thing is track everything. My mentor says what you measure and inspect improves. And so you saw the detail of the data that we go through with Steve, but we need Steven and his team and all our clients to give us feedback. Which leads became clients? Which leads were good leads and didn't become clients? Which leads were bad leads? And what were the sources of those leads, and what can we learn about it so that we can spend our efforts and our money in the right, either practice area, geography, keywords, and things like that if we're running a pay-per-click program. The Google reviews, that's one thing that's a little bit out of our hands. We came up with these gift boxes, the VIP boxes. that we're sending out for some of our bigger clients. But, you saw Steven's doing a great job getting the Google reviews, and frankly, a great job being a good law firm, right? Like, you're not going to get 5-star reviews. People are just not going to do a review. If they were dissatisfied the whole time, they couldn't get a hold, they were calling you all the time to get updates on their case, and then they're dissatisfied with the amount they got in their settlement, it's much less likely they're going to do a review at all, and much less likely you're going to get that 5-star review. And then the final thing I say is intake. You got to answer the phone. You got to answer the phone quickly, and you got to do a great job in converting those opportunities into clients, which Steven clearly does a great job, because there's only so much we can do if we're sending the leads over. We have a client, we just sent over 9 recordings of great leads they got last month that they didn't convert to cases. They didn't answer the phone. So those are the things that we appreciate in working with Steven and some of our other clients. Steven, anything you want to add on that?
I would definitely add another bullet point would be realistic and be patient. So I've learned patience as I've gotten older. And one of the things for me is, when we started, honestly, I mean, it worked a hell of a lot faster and better than I thought it would. But I was realistic and patient to say, well, if we could generate 3 or 4 cases a month, that's also fine. So, part of this is, as with anything, I did not expect that off the bat things would be, moving at 60 miles an hour. And I think when you're working with an agency, it's really important, if you trust them, which I did, that eventually things would come around. But, it's a long game. It's not a short game. And I was prepared for the long game. Now, it happened a lot faster than maybe even Jay, you guys anticipated, but it happened.
Yeah, and it's like the old TV commercials. Results not typical. It's
Right.
We can't generate 20 cases a month for a solo with a small law firm every single time. But typically we will get some ramp up with these local service ads in the first few months of the program. Then if you do the right things, Google will continue to give you just about as much love as they gave you. But Steven, maybe talk a little bit about your perspective. What makes a great agency?
I think it's probably the same thing that makes a great law firm or makes a great any professional service. And again, I don't even put results first. I would put responsiveness. So I'm a client, but I have somebody dedicated to me. She sometimes thinks I'm a pain, but she's very nice to me.
He's never said that.
You know, responsiveness. It's answering questions that I may have, having patience with me because I don't understand things. But really, it's what I've found best with you guys is the laying out the things that I needed to do. And then I had to trust that if you're telling me to do it, if I do it, again, there's no guarantees in life. All we're trying to do is improve our odds. And by following the steps you gave me, and then every month, sort of holding me accountable, I think that helps. We all need to be held accountable by somebody. And the monthly meetings, the responsiveness, and the accountability are a big factor. And again, if I have a question, it's answered. If I have an email, it's responded to. Again, I don't expect somebody to respond to my phone call within 5 minutes, but within a reasonable time, a day, 2 days. I'm patient. I understand we're all busy. But there's also that feeling of, you just have that gut feeling that the people you're working with are worthy of your trust. And I don't know if it's luck or whatever it was, but I was lucky to find you guys and lucky to
Thank you.
that I find somebody that I do trust. Again, I'm at the mercy of the agency. I have no idea, of the algorithms and things like that. And it's been great so far. And I honestly do sing the praises of the agency to friends of mine that are in the market.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, with that, maybe I'll give you the last words. We got from, you got from 5 or 10 cases a month to adding, additional 15 or 20 from the digital marketing program. What would you say to someone who's, on the fence? Like, yeah, I remember you said you wished you called us 6 or 12 months sooner after we met.
You know, at minimum, it's if you're thinking about delving into the digital marketing world, if you're someone like me who's, you know, not going to be completely all in, but want to start. I mean, the reason we started is I was dipping my toe in. That's how we kind of started. And then I kept putting my foot in a little deeper and deeper. And we got to the point where I was now getting the cases. Um, I think it's really important to have a professional who understands Google, understands digital marketing. You know, I I don't want to be a digital marketer. I want to be a lawyer, and I want to be a law firm owner, and I want to be, a boss and an entrepreneur. And we all need help. I can't learn everything. Um, and the all I can say is my experience has been they're extremely trustworthy. They will do what they need to do to make it work. And again, Jay, you never made any wild guarantees to me, not that I ever asked you. But part of the trust factor comes with, listen, I know it's advertising, it's marketing, it's, again, anything we do to improve is just to improve our odds. There's no guarantees. And when somebody, I think you guys were the first agency that did not sell me a guarantee in the sense of like, oh, you're going to get 20 cases a month. It was more of like, listen, it may take a while. You're going to have to do certain thing. And then if it's not working, we'll tweak and see how it works. So I think if you're in the digital marketing, if you're thinking about it, I absolutely think if you've got the money and you've got the motivation, you absolutely must work with an agency. And obviously, these are the guys I like.
So much.
Yes.
So we got a few questions coming in. If anyone has any questions for Steven or myself, you can do it in the Q&A or the chat. And Alyssa's sending a few over from the LinkedIn. We're live streaming on LinkedIn as well. So Barry asked, how do you get penalized by Google for not answering the phone within a certain time frame? And I think my answer, Stephen, I'll give first is there's basically a mathematical algorithm, and Google's calculating everything. They're calculating how quickly you answer the phone, how quickly you respond to people on the message app, how many reviews you're getting, and how quickly you're putting information into the back end of the operating system of the local service ads. So they're calculating how quickly you answer the phone, and I think it comes down to Google said this in their public disclosures and their like patent filings and things like that, that they're looking for websites and companies that are helpful to people. Like essentially what Google is people are asking questions, they're trying to get answers, or they're looking for help, air conditioning, plumbing, lawyer to get them the money that they deserve for their car accident. So if you answer the phone quickly, Google's going to show you more frequently that someone who doesn't answer the phone quickly. So that's the most important thing. And then also not missing any calls. Next question comes from Liz. Do LSAs require you to serve a specific mileage outside my location? Well, Stephen, you've rejiggered your geography a little bit. Why don't you take that one?
So I think I had asked you initially to just go within 5 miles of my office. And I think we could have gone further. That's where we started. And then when it started growing, I think we grew maybe to 10 miles. And then what happened, which I didn't know how it happened, you can maybe explain, is I started getting calls from 30 miles away for areas I wasn't even telling you to advertise. And they were going that far out. And people were calling me and saying, you're all over Google. And I was like, how in the world am I all over Google? I'm not doing the SEO. I'm not putting content on my website every other day. But that was the feedback I was getting. So I don't understand how it happened, but I just know that it happened. But initially, I just wanted to be, again, the big fish in the little pond. And that, in my mind, was probably the most efficient way early on, to spend my dollars.
So proximity is good. Like Google says proximity is part of their algorithm for the maps and for the local services. But in some cases, people are going statewide with the LSAs, and they're working great. And like I said, sometimes if it's not working great, we do a reboot. So we'll go more concentric to the office, or we'll go broader if we weren't wide enough. And I think the other part of the reason is, cell phones are inherently mobile, right? So people could be driving, they could drive by your office on their commute to work or something, and then Google flags them as a prospect. Or they could even, go for dinner closer to your office, and Google will see the movement of their phone. But I'm not as an expert on exactly that. Question from Joe: how is the cost per lead determined by Google? Well, I think cost per lead is really just a calculation. So we saw on Steven's chart, if he spent $1,000 in a month and got 5 leads, that's $200 a lead. And if you sign 3 of them, that's $600 a case, right? Three times 200. So that's the actual cost per lead is not really determined by Google. I think what Google is determining is, they're I believe they're trying to maximize the revenue. So as many advertisers as they have, they're going to increase the cost per click to the point where it makes sense for the advertisers to keep advertising. The pay per click is a pure auction. If I say I'm willing to pay, $300 a click, I come up above the guy who's going to pay $200 a click, with some other configurations about how efficiently your ads perform. But this system is more about, seems like Google spreads the wealth a little bit, and then if you answer the phone quickly, they give you these calls. And we saw that those leads were coming in, $150, $200 per lead. Mary asked, what's the minimum amount spent on LSA in order for them to work? There's not necessarily a minimum spend for them to work. There's a minimum spend that Google will allow you to put on your program. So in most of the markets, it's, around $500 a week. But
If
we
can I
would,
just answer that quick?
yeah, sure.
So for the summer, I told Jay, we'll do minimum spend and pick it up in September. And I'm getting cases. Now, I'm not getting 20, and I wasn't looking to get 20 leads a week, but I'm still getting leads. Not that I would recommend it in the beginning. Again, I'm just kind of in a slow, I turned it off a little bit. I'm turning it on back in September. But I got 2 cases this week that we signed. And it's Wednesday on the, where we kind of are, I guess almost like when you close the house up for the summer or the winter, and then, we're going to go back. And I got 2 cases this week signed through this.
Yeah, you got a great personal injury case this week, right?
Yeah.
Lauren asked, we're a small firm and I don't always have 1 to 2 new clients to ask for reviews each week. How do we work around that? Well, Steven gave you one great suggestion, and I have learned this in my business too. He said a lot of times you get calls for someone whose case you can't take, it's just not a fit for your business model, but you give them free advice. You tell them, either refer them to someone else, or you tell them what to do, how to file a small claim or whatever. So a lot of times you help people out on the phone. You can ask them for a review. I get the call all the time from someone's nephew who's starting an internet business and they want my help. Again, we only work with lawyers, so I'm not going to take that kid on as a client, but I can't ask him for a Google review.
I will tell you another thing I've done, and this may be a little out of the box. I have reviews from adversaries. And, if you're a plaintiff's lawyer and you've been doing it for a number of years and you're not a complete jerk, usually you should be developing relationships with the lawyers that you see on the other side. And I have. And I have had lawyers that I have a good enough relationship after a case. I would ask them, do you mind putting up a review of what you thought of me as a lawyer? And these are not reviews from clients. Now, I want you to imagine how powerful it may be if you're if you're looking for a lawyer and there are reviews coming from their adversaries. And, the best reviews are, I've had reviews from adversaries who have put on, I thought Steven was so good that I referred a case to him. So it doesn't have to even, you can get reviews from all over the place. It doesn't necessarily have to be a client. It could be somebody who made a phone call. It could be even a vendor. I've asked, vendors, can you give me a review on what you think, dealing with me has been like? There's a whole host of other people and entities that you could ask for reviews. But, I've told people about getting reviews from my adversaries, and sometimes they look at me like I'm crazy. But, again, over the years, I've developed relationships with defense lawyers because, they're good people and,
Great point.
and, listen, it's not always about fighting. There's a lot of times in a case where you've got to do a solid for the other side because we're all human. They may make a mistake and you don't want to take advantage. And when you do that and they owe you one, it's always nice to be able to say, look, remember you missed that motion date and I gave you the adjournment without a hassle. Maybe you could just write something nice about me.
Great suggestion.
It's only limited by your creativity. So if you don't have one or two clients that you're giving checks to a week, there's a whole host of other people that have dealt with you and can say nice things about you.
Well, Steven, this was awesome. Thank you so much for your time and your trust. And frankly, congratulations on your success.
You got it. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, with that, we'll wrap up. If you enjoyed this and you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast, please give us a 5-star review on YouTube or on the iTunes app or Spotify, wherever you're listening, and take a minute, search Goldstein and Handworker and give Steven a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, Steven.
Thank you for listening to the 10 Golden Rules of Internet Marketing for Law Firms podcast. Please send questions and comments to podcast@10goldenrules.com. That is podcast@TENGoldenrules.com.